What excites me most about the work I do at Michigan Rise is really the ability to have an impact on the hardest working people in this state, which are the entrepreneurs that are getting up every day to fulfill their dreams and really move the needle in innovating in the state.
Michigan Rise and MEDC had been working for a while to fill a market gap around PO financing. MEDC needed an entity like Michigan Rise, which has fantastic infrastructure to support a program like that and lower the cost of that lending. We are able to offer PO financing to startup companies in Michigan at sub 8% APR. Companies love that because they can now put the profits back into the company to grow their business.
There's many resources that Michigan Rise provides throughout the state. We provide that critical first investment in many of these companies working with our state partners. We're very fortunate that we can connect them with all 20 smart zones and all of the resources around the state of Michigan.
At any one time, we are able to lend up to $500,000 per company, and that amount is determined by our underwriting process. Once the company fulfills the purchase order, they pay us off. We can then give them another loan down the road if they have another PO coming their way.
Typically, a company gets a purchase order, but there could be anywhere from a 30 to 180 day lag from when they get that purchase order to when they fulfill that order and then ultimately get paid. So we really bridge that gap and provide the working capital when a company is really trying to grow.
We have invested in 78 companies over a span of 3 years through both equity and PO financing, which is an incredible pace of deployment to support the startup ecosystem in the state.
Michigan Rise Pre-Seed Fund number 3 is the third iteration of this fund from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. The Michigan Economic Development Corporation is just a great partner for all of us in Michigan in terms of their focus on startups in Michigan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Topouzian. I'm the Executive Director for Michigan Venture Capital Association. And today we're here to talk about the findings of our latest research report, our impact report, as we like to call it. It provides important data to the Michigan entrepreneurial and investor ecosystem. And we've been doing this report for several years. I'd love to give a big shout out and thank you to the entire research report committee. These are volunteers that work tirelessly to help us with this project. And I'd also like to acknowledge our sponsor that you saw a video right before this, Michigan Rise. It's a pleasure to have them certainly as a partner with us as we move forward. So purpose of today is we're not going to go through every bit of detail in this report, but we're going to provide you some highlights. And certainly there's a link on our website, and you can view and download the research report to look at that in detail. I'd like to introduce the gentlemen that are here with me today. First, Dan Kidle. He's the managing partner at Arboretum Ventures. He is the research report chair for this committee. Thank you, Dan, for doing that and being on this program. Jeff Rinvelt, our illustrious MVCA board chair. He's a partner at Renaissance Venture Capital and is the liaison to the Research Report Committee. No stranger to this data. I think, Jeff, you've been doing this for a very long time, so thank you for being on this as well. And Prem Bodagala, who's the director at Cedar Ventures and Michigan Rise, also part of this important committee and the work that's been done. So we're going to chat today. We're going to jump right in. Got some questions, and let's go right at it. So the research report presents key analysis of the Michigan investment ecosystem. And over the past few years, we've witnessed some notable achievements and positive developments alongside effectively navigating some really challenging times, especially with the pandemic and so forth. Let's first discuss how the Michigan ecosystem looks as we have it outlined in the report, as well as how we compare within the Great Lakes system. Dan, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, happy to. And you started by thanking the research report committee, but I'd like to give a shout out to the MVCA staff and you for your work on this, because it really is an important resource both for us in the VC and entrepreneurial community, but also for educating folks that aren't in our ecosystem to help them understand the impact. So in terms of this year's report, I want to start by zooming out a little bit and thinking about the national level of what's gone on in venture. So post-COVID, I think there were a lot of questions of, oh, is there going to be a decline in venture activity? And instead, we saw the exact opposite. And 2021 was a truly unprecedented year for venture capital investment. So there was more than $345 billion deployed in 2021, which is more than double any year previous to that. And 2022 saw a bit more choppy waters. So nationally, there was still 239 billion invested in VC-backed companies, but that's about more than a 30% decline from 2021. So while there's still a lot of capital flowing, there was definitely a pullback in the ecosystem from the record-breaking deployment we saw then. Interestingly, if you zoom in on Michigan, we also had a big bump in 2021 and had over $1 billion deployed that year. But in 2022, we continued to grow. So we had, not huge, but I'd say healthy growth to $1.2 billion deployed into VC-backed companies in the state, which I think is really a testament both to the impact that this industry has on our state economy, and also the resilience that we had in a year that was a bit choppy from the financial markets perspective and, the broader VC ecosystem. So, and if you look at the 10-year trends, Michigan shows very well that there's been a very healthy increase in activity over time. And if you look at within our Great Lakes region, we're fifth in the list with 164 deals and 1.2 billion in 2022. So, great. We should all feel good about that, of a strong 2020, 2022. And, I think one of the important metrics that we always look at is how much are we able to leverage the funding that we're putting into companies. And as you'll see in the research report this year, for every dollar invested by funds in the state, we were able to bring in more than $30 outside of Michigan. So this is, very impactful in terms of economic development and bringing capital from outside of our state and outside of our region to support jobs and growth stage companies here. Now, I'd say the one area for concern, we're always looking for leading indicators of what's to come. And I think there are two leading indicators highlighted in this year's report that warrant some mention. One of which is fundraising. So if you look at new VC funds being raised, 2022 was definitely a down year. And I can say from personal experience at Arboretum, we were able to raise a new fund, which we announced this year, but it was a very difficult environment in terms of getting new LP commitments to funds. And that's a critical funding source for companies going forward. Second is on the whole, we had a growth in investment, both in terms of number of companies and capital. But if you look by stage, the earliest stage companies, so angel deals and seed stage deals, we had a pretty significant decline looking 2021 to 2022. And that's really the pipeline of companies that can attract those larger rounds, hire more employees, generate more revenue in the years to come. And so I think if there's an area to watch out for, or where there's really, I think, opportunity to inject more into the ecosystem, it's really in that earliest stage funding, which is sort of a critical pipeline for later stage and years to come.
Yeah, that's a good question to piggyback on. Prem, talk to me about some sort of the factors that lead toward this shortage. I mean, we've been talking for the last couple of years about the lack of capital for early stage and funding. So what maybe potential strategies could we implement to address this for improvement in the future?
Sure. I think in the last few years, as we look at the support for the early stage funding in Michigan, what we have found is Michigan has lagged behind others in our Midwestern neighborhood, right? There's several factors. One of them could be potentially going beyond the last couple of years, further back. The hold periods have gotten longer. And so some folks who would have been earlier, or the earliest stage funders, have gone further downstream. So what does that mean? The entities that are backed by the economic development organization in the state, and entities like that, I believe should get more support, such that they can kind of fill the gap left by those who have gone further downstream. Another, I think, solution could be boosting the resources of university-based venture funds. There are 3 funds like that in the state today, but there's a lot more companies coming out of these universities than what those 3 funds can support. So by boosting the resources, both for operations as well as for investments, I think that core piece of that early stage pipeline that sets the stage up for later stage funders like venture funds, et cetera, can be improved significantly and bring us on par with some of the other states in our neighborhood.
Jeff, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it sort of leads into the next question, actually, Ara, side of it that, there's multiple sides of this equation. A lot of it is the funding for venture capital, where Dan talked about the leading indicators. We have assets under management, which is definitely a trailing indicator, but we're seeing still the effects of the Venture Michigan Fund that we had, and we sort of saw the stalling out of that actually this year, where where our assets under management actually, it was the same as we had last year. And we're starting to see the other states around us actually picking up steam and like right at our stuff. We're always going to see Illinois sort of is at the top of that, but both Ohio and Minnesota are sort of right at our heels, and they have much better sort of robust programs around some of that early stage funding or funding for assets under management. So I know there's lots of work on that, and Renaissance is doing lots of work of funding venture capital funds that we can do, but it is a public partnership, and we're seeing much more sort of work needs to be done in those areas.
Prem, could you provide an overview of the diversity, equity, and inclusion outcomes and achievements highlighted in the report, particularly focusing on how these results demonstrate progress and positive impacts in Michigan context?
Sure, Ara. I think as the numbers indicate, first of all, I want to recognize that Michigan numbers are better than the nationwide numbers. So that is definitely a positive, but I think we could be doing more there. With large, underserved populations in cities like Detroit and Flint, and with some of the best universities in the country, we definitely, I think, can kind of lean into that better kind of results than the rest of the country, and kind of show the path to the nation. Some of the work, I think, is being done by organizations like MVCA and some of the funds even, who are making efforts both at the fund level, but also at the portfolio company level to kind of improve the state of DEI in the state. I think we see examples of that where companies like the Lip Bar, which is a Michigan-based company, is one of the most used cosmetic brand by women of color, Breadless, and spin-outs from our universities, which are founded by immigrant and BIPOC leaders such as Genomenon. They are paving the shiniest paths in their respective industries. And I also want to, I think, talk a little bit about Michigan Rise's own kind of efforts in this. We have been very intentional about looking at DEI as it relates to our investments. And of the 78 companies that we have invested in to date with both equity and PO financing, 70% are founded or led by teams from an underserved demographic. Now, we also use geography as an underserved demographic because the availability of capital, even in Michigan, is not uniform across the state. But kind of digging a little deeper into those metrics, 35% of our 78 companies are led by BIPOC individuals, and the 32% are founder or led by female leaders. While those numbers are, better than the nationwide spectrum, I think we could be doing more, and I'm optimistic about our initiatives and efforts in that regard.
Yeah, I think this would be a good time to really highlight some of the work that we've done at MVCA. To your point, Prem, that I think we're doing better than average, but we all know there's a lot more work that needs to be done. A couple of years ago, we established a DE&I committee to take a look at not only what we think is missing in the ecosystem, but really to get to a point where we don't need to have a DE&I committee. It'll be ingrained in everything that we do. And I think the work has been pretty good, and it's still, it's a process, and we're still going through it. On our website, we've got some resources that we've put together. These are efforts that came out of the DE&I committee, and it's for our members and really for entrepreneurs to kind of take a look at. Some of the items that are in there is really impact statements that VC firms have adopted that says, hey, this is how we're going to view DE&I. This is how we expect entrepreneurs to look at it. And so there's folks like, Arboretum and Mercury and eLab that have adopted a lot of these statements. We've got examples of those on our website. The other area that we felt was missing, and I think we struggle with this, to be honest, in the report, is really to get great data. It's not, you can't buy this type of data. You have to really dig and get this on your own. So we do quite a bit of that, and we're still doing that. We recently did a survey that we sent out to the investor community to forward to their portfolio company, asking a series of questions. Now, feedback to that wasn't as strong as we like, and I think that is not a surprising thing, but it's something that's ongoing. So we know that we need to collect some more data. We need to be able to put more and more information out there. We do, on a monthly basis, even in our newsletter and certainly our social media and whatnot, and always promoting things like the lip bar, Prem, that you talked about, and other entrepreneurs that should be highlighted. The other thing I would add is, and maybe a plug for MVCA, is the Venture Fellows program. Here was a program that this started several years ago, and morphed into including a diversity and equity component to it. Now, unfortunately, at that time, funding dried up for it, but luckily we were able to get funding back. Special thanks to the Lieutenant Governor for helping us secure that, and the MEDC. And so the program itself has a heavy DE&I component to it. And what's great about a program like this is not only is it bringing new investors into the community that hopefully they will go on and create their own funds here in Michigan, but it's encouraging a younger generation, a diverse generation of individuals. We also have had an internship program as well, where we've tried to encourage students throughout the state to have paid internships within the venture capital community. So I think, there is a lot of positiveness that are going on. We're certainly seeing work by the founders community that are having, different types of networking events, and we're trying to do those as well and incorporate folks into that. So a lot of work still needs to be done, but I think that it's made some great strides in these last, couple of years. Let's continue that sort of positiveness a bit. And really, I want to ask all three of you to maybe share some notable success stories that have emerged either through initiatives or different endeavors that have happened here within Michigan. Jeff, I'm going to start with you, and then Prem, and then Dan. If you jump in, it'd be great.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, for me, the last week, the best thing from last year was Michigan Tech Week and Undemo. I think that was one of those amazing weeks that we all had around it. And it's nice seeing the whole community sort of get around, entrepreneurship and celebrating entrepreneurship. And, we definitely, are starting that off again in 2023. We've got A360 just starting off, and next week when this is, going to be released, we've got, Grand Rapids Tech Week. And then we start off off with Michigan Tech Week again, sort of, and Undemo sort of happening in Detroit again. So this is going to be another great week for that. And I'm looking forward to that and showing, all the great companies around in Michigan and, for our community, but also for, shining a light on Michigan to all the people that have come into Michigan and look at our amazing companies.
Prem?
Yeah, I'll share two stories that I'm very fond of. I'll start with Rinvelt work, which is actually mentioned in the research report. The founder was an entrepreneur at Bosch, and this is the great thing about Michigan. We have all these, large corporations and entrepreneurs. They have, line of sight to the problems in their industries. He chose to come out and set up his own company. Michigan Rise was one of the first Michigan-based institutional investors in that company. And just with support from angels and other early stage funders, they were able to raise a prize seed round from another MVCA member here in Michigan. And I like the story because it kind of shows that path, right? Like early stage, maybe a hybrid thesis funder supports them alongside angels, then a more later stage VC, and then most recently, and I think the Undemo Day that Jeff mentioned had a role to play in this. They were able to connect with a West Coast-based VC that led their most recent round. So it kind of shows the continuum of funding from the earliest to a little bit more intermediate stages. And the other one I'm really excited about is the nascent but growing space economy in the northern and upper peninsula part of Michigan. So there's two companies in our portfolio, Orbion Space and KMI, and there's another company called Atlas, and all those companies have received investment both from Michigan as well as venture funds outside the state. In the case of Orbion, they recently closed an oversubscribed round. So just very, very thrilled to kind of observe that exciting kind of frontier growing within our state.
It's good that you said that, Prem, because I think we should notate that not everything happens in sort of the Ann Arbor region, right? The hubs have always been Ann Arbor, Detroit, Grand Rapids, but there is quite a bit going on in the UP, and we're seeing even more of that these last few years. So hopefully we'll witness more of that. Dan, anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, and I'd say this not to be too self-promotional, because I really think it's more of a testament to the ecosystem than to us. But we were very pleased to raise a new fund this year, and it's not in the 2022 report because it'll be a 2023 fund. But I think the interesting thing in going through that fundraising process and talking to LPs, particularly outside the state, is how much our Midwest and Michigan focus matters to them in terms of an investment thesis. And they ask us a lot of questions about our deal flow in the state and what the entrepreneurial community is like, and our roster of executives who can come in. What's our relationship like with the different universities, and what are the seed funding sources at those universities that create the deal flow for you guys? And we're very pleased to be able to point to a lot of history investing in the state and successfully supporting companies that are in our backyard, and that's really been critical to our success. And we're very pleased to be able to continue on that path.
Yeah, that's terrific. I'm glad you did point that out. All right, the last question is the crystal ball question that we always ask when we talk about the report. So what's not in the report is I'd like to get all of your perspectives on how you feel 2023 will end up. As I think, Dan, when you had first started talking about, it's been a bit of an interesting year, to say the least, and certainly with the banking industry going through what they went through in Q1. Here we are now approaching fall. What do you think, given what we see in the research report that we released, and certainly maybe some anticipation of how you feel the VC community will go for the rest of this year, maybe into 2024? Dan, do you want to start out with that?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. As I referenced, it has become a much more difficult fundraising environment for venture capitalists. So, we got it done in the end. It was a very long process, and we were very thankful to have supportive LPs like Jeff and his team at Renaissance who joined our fund. But getting new fund commitments, I think, is going to continue to be a struggle in 2023. So I think the fundraising side and capital availability is an area we're going to continue to watch. I think on the more positive side, I think it has potential to be a great time for venture capital deployment in terms of finding attractive opportunities that, sometimes in a slightly unstable or downturn market, you've got great opportunities. There's still a bit of, I think, tension in the market as valuations are getting flushed out in a new funding environment. But, we're really excited to be deploying capital with a new fund and think that, the environment is really good for growth stage companies to, start taking off again.
Jeff, I throw the crystal ball to you.
I'll echo Dan's comment. Fundraising is going to be, harder for all the venture capital funds. The good news is we're not seeing basically a retreat from venture capital. Sometimes, during 2001, 2008, we did see large limited partners, making it not a preferred equity term. They still seem to, have this on their, in their portfolios. They're actually staying with those. It just means that they sort of took a breather when they were deploying capital so quickly, basically in the late 2000s. The good news I sort of see is it's like all valuations from startups have dropped, but the earliest stages haven't dropped that much. It's down to single digits, where in other terms we sort of seen a cut across the board. So what that means is the early stages, everybody's still very excited about all those commitments. It's just the late stage deals that sort of have to readjust to the new normal of the public markets. And again, I always like to remind myself and other people that again, the last downturn was 2008, and we had names like Uber and Airbnb and WhatsApp sort of started during then. So all those new companies are being started right now in Michigan, and and it's our job to support them and make sure they actually get to the finish line.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And it's interesting, during my tenure here, when COVID just started, I freaked out. And when I talked to a number of you, you're like, we've weathered these kinds of storms before, and there'll be continuing ones, and we've done just fine. Prem, you get the last word, and you could hold the crystal ball. Anything you'd like to add to this before we end today?
Absolutely. I think there's increasing realization about the dearth of support in the earliest stages of funding. A couple of surveys were commissioned by various nonprofits, and even at the state level. And I think all the research or the data indicates that we are significantly behind in states like Ohio. And so if I was kind of like reading between the lines in there, I feel like there is a lot of impetus for the support to increase in the coming year, so that we can kind of stand head to head with our Midwestern neighbors and do right by the entrepreneurs and the tech startups in our state.
Excellent, very good. Dan, Prem, Jeff, thank you very much for taking the time to talk about some highlights in the report. We welcome all of you to go to michiganvca.org. You can download the report. You could take a look at the report in depth. And as always, special thanks again to our sponsor for today, the folks at Michigan Rise. Thank you and take care.